Good evening, Lions Arch. I'm your host, Snraf Longhammer. Tonight, we have a special report on an incredibly mysterious race known as the Seers, an enigmatic race of magically attuned ancients. These people are some of the oldest and most powerful creatures to have ever inhabited Tyria, hosting 4 arms with grayish skin. A prominent characteristic of these creatures were the fact that they could levitate, possibly influenced in some way by their magical ability, being some of the most powerful spellcasters Tyria has ever seen. Their impact on the world is immense, but because of an ancient war, little of Seer culture remains. Going back over 10,000 years ago, we have the previous rise of the Elder Dragons, where they awoke from their slumber and brought devastation to Tyria. The prominent races at the time were the Dwarves, the Forgotten, the Jotun, the Mursaat, and the Seers. Together, these races were allied with each other and united to combat the threat that the Elder Dragons posed on the world and their societies. Together, with the united power of these various nations, the people of Tyria may hold a chance against the Elder Dragons, but as these people marched against the Elder Dragon Zaitan, everything broke apart. The Seers suddenly decided to withdraw their support in this fight, prompting the Dwarves and Jotun to turn around and leave as well, leaving only the Forgotten and the Mursaat left to face Zaitan and be promptly, devastatingly defeated. Because of the Seers' betrayal, the Mursaat never forgave them. Through the Seers' powerful magics, they were able to create incredibly powerful artifacts. One is known as Lagavo, also known as the Scepter of Ore, an artifact so powerful that it could direct the Titans, control the undead, and extend one's life. The twin to Lagavo is Momund, also known as the Staff of the Mists. This powerful staff could bend the fabric of the universe and could be used alongside Lagavo to protect Tyria from extraplanar threats. But perhaps the most powerful of the Seers artifacts are the Shadow Stones, artifacts that could amplify the magical abilities of the Seers to an even greater degree while also storing immense amounts of magics. Through the Shadow Stone, the Seers would create the original Bloodstone, with the intention to allow the races of Tyria to store their magics inside of it and hide it away from the Elder Dragons so that it may be tapped upon again in the future. But because of the Seers' betrayal and the conflict against Zaitan, the Mursaat refused to give up their magic and decided to use their Shadowcraft magic to shift to a different plane of existence in Tyria, into a shadowed pocket of existence, allowing them to hide from the Elder Dragons, let the Dragon Rising pass, and return to Tyria in the future. As the Mursaat were away, there was not much that the other races of Tyria could do to combat the Elder Dragons, and each one essentially went their own ways. The Dwarves reinforced their homelands and were able to continue thriving in Tyria up until they enacted the Right of the Great Dwarf. The Jotun returned to their seclusion and slowly, over time, devolved as a society and returned to a savage state. The Forgotten worked tirelessly to help prepare Tyria for the next Dragon Rising, recognizing that while there may not be much left for them, they can set the foundations for future generations. The Forgotten created a great spell that freed Glint, the scion of the Elder Dragon Krakatorrik, from his will, an incredibly powerful and prophetic dragon who foresaw the future and wrote the Flameseeker prophecies which would eventually come to pass. Through Glint's powers, she was able to conceal these races from the Elder Dragons, and all survived in some form as the dragons eventually returned to their slumber. With the threat of the Elder Dragons put to the side for some unfortunate folks 10,000 years in the future to deal with, the Mursaat began to take action to claim revenge against the Seers. The two societies began to wage war upon one another for millennia. Battle after battle, atrocity after atrocity, these two nations beat back, fell hard, and rebounded countless times. This conflict caused immense damage to both the lands these two races inhabited, but also to the psyche of their peoples. The Mursaats channeled incredibly powerful magics that would annihilate at best and cause excruciating pain at worst. Spectral Agony is an incredibly dangerous magic that the Mursaat were able to use to defeat the Seers time and time again, creating jade constructs that would utilize this spectral agony in battle for the Mursaat and hunt down any Seers that they could find. Eventually, the Seers were able to create a resistance to the Mursaat's spectral agony, which would help them turn the tide of the battle, except it was too late. While at the beginning of this war, the Seers greatly outnumbered the Mursaat were able to defeat the Seers time and time again and whittle down their numbers. Over time, the Seers were all but extinct as their entire civilization were wiped out, and only a few Seers survived to roam Tyria until they themselves died. In the wake of this war, the Mursaat constructed a new capital atop the location where the Mursaat-Seer war had ended in the Isles of Janthir, calling this location Palawa Ignacious. From here, the Mursaat would continue to commit unspeakable atrocities against the people of Tyria. The few remaining Seers roamed Tyria and did what they could to survive, and they took it upon themselves to help those who would fight against the Mursaat once again. With the Mursaat having created the White Mantle for their purposes in relation to the Door of Kamali, the human rebel group known as the Shining Blade fought back against the White Mantle and thus the Mursaat in order to reclaim Kryda. This archived combat footage, graciously donated by the Shining Blade, showcases an operation where Shining Blade agents met up with one of the final Seers who assisted the agents by teaching them how to resist the dangerous spectral agony that the Mursaat wielded. In turn, the Shining Blade, through the Asuran Golemancer Zin, would repay the favor by experimenting on the corpse of a Seer to develop the spectral infusion which was ultimately paramount in the Shining Blade's successful rebellion against the White Mantle. In the wake of this war, one final Seer existed who vowed to ensure that the final surviving Mursaat, Lazarus the Dire, would ultimately be defeated, gifting the Shining Blade an incredibly powerful Seer artifact known as the Shining Blade. Yes, they named this incredibly powerful and ancient artifact after themselves. And as the Seer took their last breath, their race became extinct, except one still lives. Lion's Arch was recently abuzz with the introduction of a new organization of people who have been secretly working in the shadows, or shall I say, the skies of Tyria for millennia. One Seer, millennia ago, by the name of Iskarin, used the powers of the Seers to create a new empire, founding Omnitus, hidden underneath the atmosphere of Tyria. Iskarin utilized a Seer Shadow Stone to build the World Spire, which would help protect Tyria from known and unknown threats beyond Tyria itself and located throughout the mists. Recruiting others to join their ranks, including a Mursaat by the name of Maban, Iskarin created the Wizard's Court, a union of incredibly powerful spellcasters who would overlook Omnitus and defend Tyria from those various threats. With them, the Astral Ward would be founded, who would work with and under the Wizard's Court to ensure the safety of all of those on Tyria. As the wars and famines of Tyria waged on underneath Omnitus, Iskarin saw his people be wiped out by the hands of the Mursaat and eventually become extinct, leaving only him alive. While Iskarin had kept the Wizard's Court and Astral Ward hidden away from Tyria, the threats of Eparch and the Cryptus, as well as the various other lingering threats in the mists, provoked Iskarin to reveal Omnitus to the rest of the world, where Iskarin himself returned to Tyria to ally his Wizard's Court and the Astral Ward with the newfound fledgling Tyrian alliance, so that all nations and organizations in Tyria could work together to safeguard the planet. A consortium representative was able to make their way into a Tyrian alliance meeting and asked Iskarin his thoughts about his entire race being wiped out, everyone he loved dying, and his homeland being completely destroyed. With the Tyrian Alliance's ventures into the Janthir wilds to explore the remnants of Mursaat civilization, after they themselves were eventually wiped out by the Shining Blade, heroes were able to explore the location of some of the final battles between the Mursaat and Seers, allowing themselves to learn much more about their ancient cultures and the conflicts that arose. With members of the Tyrian Alliance attempting to make their way into Palawa Ignacious proper, it is assumed that much more will be explored in the future. Ultimately, the Seers are an incredibly powerful and ancient race of magical spellcasters who met an unfortunate fate to the hands of the Mursaat. With their entire civilization being wiped out, only Iskarin remains, but he is focused on the stability of Omnitus and the protection of Tyria. From all of us at the Consortium News Network, this has been Snraf Longhammer. Good night.